Hey, Fort Washington family, welcome back to another episode or installment or edition, or whatever we're calling these things, of spiritual growth. As you know, Pastor David Swan with you again. We have been walking through this idea of spiritual growth. We've been going through a number of disciplines and really unpacking the idea of maturing spiritually. And as has been our custom, I'm going to remind you of three things before we even get started today. And three things about our spiritual growth. The first thing is that our spiritual growth does not happen automatically. So again, I don't want you to be discouraged like, hey, man, I gave my life to Christ. I joined Zion. I've been serving for like 2 years, but I don't feel like it's happening. Well, are you just going through the motions, or are you really taking advantage of some of these and really pouring yourself into some of these disciplines that we've been referencing? Second, it doesn't happen quickly. And I think this also ties into the last one. It doesn't happen without discipline. So it doesn't necessarily happen at the same rate for everyone. It may be rapid for some, it may be slower for others, but we need to be disciplined if we want to achieve this. Again, it's no coincidence that the word disciple and the word discipline have the same word root. It is impossible to be an undisciplined disciple of Christ. We can look throughout the New Testament. We can look throughout the Gospels as those 12 men were sharing their life with Christ, his disciples, his inner circle, and nothing that they accomplished was done so without discipline. So let's dive, pun intended, into our discipline for today. And today I want to talk about this idea of giving or stewardship. And this is something that's really often overlooked. It's something that maybe people think just it happens, but it's not that important, or it happens out of a responsibility, or people tend to sometimes disconnect this from worship. I really want to encourage you to worship God through your giving. And if you really understand that He's the source of everything we have, and we're merely managers of these things, it really starts to put a lot into perspective. So let's take a look to get started at Deuteronomy chapter 8. Deuteronomy chapter 8, I'm going to be reading verses 17 and 18. And the text says, "He did all this so you would never say to yourself, I have achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy. Remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you power to be successful in order to fulfill the covenant He confirmed to your ancestors with an oath." And I really want to hang my hat on just the one phrase in verse 18. He is the one who gives you the power to be successful. So I don't care how much you feel like you've accomplished naturally. All the degrees you have, when you sign your emails and you have all these letters at the end of your name, the PhDs and the MBAs and the JDs and whatever else you happen to have accomplished, God has given you the ability to do all of those things, which means that everything that you attain and acquire through those means really is a direct reflection of Him. And He's directly responsible for those things. So how much more is it not only appropriate, but really a responsibility of ours to worship Him by giving back some of what's really His. Everything that we have, everything that we've accomplished, everything that we've acquired belongs to Him. If we're just managing it, we're ultimately responsible for really giving it back to Him. He's allowing us to have all of it. Let's give Him back a portion of it. And so what I want to do is go through a couple of parables that Christ uses in the New Testament, and really try to unpack these and tie them into this idea of stewardship or giving. Now, I want to give us this fundamental principle before we dive into these parables. The fundamental principle of biblical stewardship. It's really short, but if you take nothing else away from what I'm saying, write this part down. We own nothing. God owns everything. We are simply managers. Again, we own nothing. God owns everything. We are simply managers. So let's look at a few parables in the New Testament around the idea of money, dealing with the idea of money, but also helping us to understand how important our stewardship, not just our giving, but our stewardship is, how responsible we are for what God has given us. So in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. We're not going to read all of the verses, but I want to give you that location so you can go study these in your own time. We have what many refer to as the parable of the talents. The parable of the talents. And a quick summary of the parable. Effectively, Jesus tells a story about a wealthy owner or a wealthy manager of some sort. And he gave 3 of his workers different amounts of talents. One he gave 5, one he gave 3, one he gave 1. And with these talents, the three individuals did three different things. The individual with the 5 talents, I believe, worked and doubled or tripled the amount. The individual with 3 talents also did some investing and was able to make a return. The individual with the 1 talent just buried it so that they would make sure that they didn't lose it, and they returned it to their owner, or to their master. And the parable or the moral of the story, what we find out here is that the individual who did nothing was the individual that was frowned upon. Not so much because they lost the money, because they certainly didn't, but because they sat on their hands and did nothing. If God has given us all of these things, and not just financial means, he's given us these talents, gifts, and abilities that we are supposed to be stewards of. When you steward something, you don't just sit on it and do nothing. Let me give you this quote that I think will kind of underscore the importance of us doing something with what we've been given. The most monstrous evils of our time have been built on the assumption that human life happened by accident. People did things. We're going to have to be, and to be effective stewards, we can't just sit on our hands and do nothing. So again, God will reward diligence and faithfulness, but he will punish laziness. He will punish laziness. And again, this third servant, he's not judged for doing something bad. He's judged for simply doing nothing. He didn't lie, he didn't cheat, he didn't steal, but he sat on his hands and he did nothing. Let's go to another parable. This one is a bit more challenging because it's one that when Jesus first tells the parable, I'm sure the audience was like, wait a second, are you really telling us that that's what we should be doing? In Luke chapter 16, we have the parable of the shrewd manager. Parable of the shrewd manager. And this manager is told by his boss that he's going to be relieved of his duties. And this manager potentially had been up to some wrongdoing, but it's not clear to us in the parable that the business owner is aware of this. The business owner just says, you haven't done a good job as a manager, so you're going to be relieved of your duties. I think it's safe to say that if the owner knew that the manager was guilty of fraud, that he would have been fired right then and there. Once he finds out that his days are numbered, he goes to some of the people who owe his owner. And he says, hey, I'm about to lose my job. I'm just going to use numbers. Jesus doesn't give us the exact numbers. You owe my owner 1,000 pieces of silver. I'll settle your debt for 750 pieces of silver if you give me a place to stay after I'm out of my job. He goes and cuts some deals with people, and it really seems like something that's not quite honest because he's not quite honoring his master or his boss the right way. But Jesus tells us about how the people of this world, that we're going to have to be a part of this world. He talks about the unbelievers. The unbelievers, they are very shrewd and wise when it comes to what's going on in this world, and that we certainly need to be the same. We certainly need to do the same thing and have a certain amount of wisdom. Now, if we look at the original Greek text, there were actually 2 primary words for wisdom that were used in this time. One word was Sophia, which has a spiritual, pious ring to it. And this is the wisdom that comes from above. It's about godly character and conduct. And this wisdom comes from the grace of God. But the word that Jesus uses when he talks about wisdom, when he's talking about the shrewd manager, is a word, and I may be mispronouncing this, I'm going to have to go back to my concordance, phronimos, which means cunning, cleverness, street smarts. And Jesus uses this, he uses this word when he talks about later on the wise man who built his house on the rock and not on sand and not on rocks and things of that nature. And so it takes no special revelation to know that we need to be not only have the wisdom that comes from God, but we need to have a certain shrewdness to operate to, again, be effective stewards of what God has given us. Now, again, Jesus is not encouraging us to be dishonest, but he's encouraging us to be shrewd, to be cunning, to be aware of what's going on around us. He doesn't, obviously we're supposed to be in this world, but not of it. He doesn't want us to be taken advantage by the world to take advantage of us as well. And the last parable that I want to touch on, this is another fantastic one where I really think underscores the idea of generosity and the idea, again, everything we've been given comes from God. The parable of the vineyard workers. This can be found in Matthew chapter 20. I want to say you want to go through about the first 16 verses or so, maybe less. And in this passage, there is a vineyard owner who hires 3 different people, and he promises them a fair wage. One of them comes to work in the morning, One of them comes to work at midday. One of them comes to work in the afternoon. So obviously, just by the passage of time, you can tell the person that came to work in the morning worked the longest shift. The one that came to work in the afternoon worked the shortest shift, and the one that came late obviously worked the shortest shift, but they all received the same pay. Now, the person who came in the morning was like, wait a second, dude, this is all sorts of unfair. What are you talking about? And this is something that we are, unfortunately, are guilty of as believers as well. Maybe we've been serving for some time. We've been going to church for some time. We've been a believer for some time. And someone now, they just gave their life to Christ last week and they're already serving on the same ministry that we're serving on. And we're looking at them like maybe they don't belong, or how could you possibly be here? Or I put in more time than you. I deserve this more than you. But this that we deserve, doesn't it belong to God? Shouldn't he be the distributor? Shouldn't he be the one that determines what everyone gets? And obviously he's a fair and merciful and loving God. So it's not up to us to say, hey, I've been serving in this ministry for 2 years, so there's no possible way this person can be a greeter like me, or this person, just because they have a financial background, they can't count the money as well as I do, or this person just joined with the ministry fair. There's no way they should be in the parking lot already. Giving and stewardship. We need to be stewards of these opportunities God has given us. And sometimes being stewards of those opportunities obviously means not just sitting on them and doing nothing with them, but it also means sharing them with others, making sure that other people are blessed by what we have and that we can give to others. This fantastic quote, I've been full of quotes this session, but I think when we think about the idea of giving, sometimes just hearing other people, sometimes in non-biblical terms, talk about giving is like, wow, that's really eye-opening. And there's a quote that's been attributed to a couple of people. I feel like it's been attributed by the person who wrote Les Miserables. It's been attributed to Ralph Waldo Stevenson. I believe it's been attributed to a couple of people. But this quote: "It is possible to give without loving, but it is impossible to love without giving." Just let that sit with you for a moment. Like, I can give people things and just to check off a box, to help my tax return at the end of the year. I can just do some giving, but I can give and not really feel anything for that person. But if I truly, truly love someone, it is impossible to truly, truly love someone and not give. It's just simply impossible. So as we've done every week, what do we do to put this stewardship or giving into practice? We're actually gonna do a repeat of something that we mentioned last time. We talked about this idea of serving, this idea of service. And one of the ideas I said, hey, if you're a beginner and you wanna start increasing your service, maybe you just, the next time you're in the drive-thru, serve the car behind you by paying for them. This can also be an act of giving. Give to the car behind you by paying for their meal. Or set up some recurring giving, so that you don't have to make a decision. You're not faced with that emotional, ooh, should I give? I don't have much to give. I need to pay this bill. I need to do that. In your budget, make God a line item so that your giving is just recurring and it comes out regularly, and not so much that you don't have to think about it, but it's a recurring act of worship and it's already in that budget. An intermediate, okay, so I'm past that beginner stage. I want to go to the next level. Give the people around you a raise. Give God a raise. Give the hairstylist a raise. Give the barber a raise. Give the mechanic a raise. Give the nail technician a raise. These service providers in your life, give them a raise. And I would be stunned if God didn't turn around and give you a raise as well. And then lastly, maybe you're ready for the advanced level. You know what? I'm very giving. I'm very generous towards people. I really want to take this idea of stewardship and giving to the next level. Now we can really talk about the idea of sacrificial giving. So we've already talked about making God a line item in the budget. And in that budget, we also have our wants and needs. Are we willing to take some of our wants out of that budget in order to support ministry more, and just really focus on our needs and then what we can do with the rest to help God? Now that's a challenge, and that's one that I'm even working towards in some aspects of my life. It's very, very difficult to say, hey, these are things that I want, these are things that I've been dreaming about or focusing on or excited about. You know, there's this trip I've wanted to take the family on. There's this new electronic gadget I wanted to get, whatever the case may be. Those are wants. It's certainly fantastic to have time with family, but is the vacation the need or is the vacation the want? Can we have a staycation and give instead? Maybe during that time off, we're volunteering our time, or we're giving some of the money that would have been spent on a flight. We're donating it to someone else. Now, I'm not saying that you never go and spend time with your family. So don't say, hey, I don't want any husbands listening to this to tell their wives we cannot go on vacation because Pastor David said that I need to give that money away. I'm not suggesting that. But I am saying that that can really stretch ourselves. We can really stretch ourselves and take that giving to the next level by focusing on our needs instead of our wants and trying to bless someone else with what's remaining. All right, so again, this idea of stewardship or giving, an excellent component of spiritual growth. I hope that you were blessed, and I hope that you take some time to really dive into and unpack those parables and see how they can help you as you endeavor to grow spiritually as well. Hope that you were blessed by this. Take care and have a great week.